Welcome to the Physician Associate Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Physician Associate Podcast. My name is James. Today I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest called Shelly Collins. Welcome to the show, Shelly.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on, James.
You want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, Shelly Collins, I'm a physician associate. I'm originally from the United States. I've been practicing for about 16 years or so. But for the past year and a half, I've actually been practicing in New Zealand.
Yeah, I was really interested to find out where physician associates can work across the world. I wasn't really that aware that PAs were out in New Zealand.
We're very new to the country, and we're technically not even a regulated profession yet in New Zealand. So it's kind of like the Wild West out here.
That's very similar to how it is in the UK at the moment.
Right. Well, it is interesting. And I was kind of looking at the history of the UK, and it seems like we've just done everything you've done. You guys are just about 10 years ahead of us. And then we're like, oh, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. We're going to do what they're doing. So similar to the UK, ours did start with 2 pilot programs back in 2010, and then they did a second one in 2013. And there were small groups, I think maybe 7 PAs total who came over to work for a couple of years. And then the government had an independent third party to review how it went and give a report. They decided PAs were safe to work in the country and were needed to help with the GP shortage, of course. So we've been trying since, 2014 to get our application through the Ministry of Health and Workforce New Zealand to actually become a regulated profession.
It is amazing how similar that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, over the past 2 years, though, things have really just taken off. I don't know what happened. I don't know if word got around finally to enough of the right people, but we're just waiting to see if someone will agree to be our regulatory body. And that's really the main thing that's holding us up at this point. We're hoping that will be New Zealand Medical Council.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed. So all being on schedule in the UK, the General Medical Council, which is the body that regulates the doctors, should regulate the physician associates about this time next year, hopefully.
Oh, that's exciting.
So you trained originally in the States?
Yes. So I'm originally from the States. I grew up in Oklahoma, so kind of the middle of the States. Some people think of it the South. I don't know if we think of ourselves as the South, but we're definitely Southern in how we are.
I can hear that slight twang in your accent.
Yeah. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And about 2017, my family and I moved to Seattle, Washington, which is an amazing place. And we lived there for 2 years before I discovered that PAs were in New Zealand. And we got to New Zealand in January 1st, 2020. So pretty good timing on our part.
I was just thinking that. Yeah, wow, you timed that really well.
We really did.
Obviously, with the COVID pandemic beginning, what's that been like working through New Zealand? Is it business as usual?
Yeah, so initially in the end of March 2020, we had about a 6-week lockdown when things, initially hit. And it was because I was an essential worker. I still went to work every day. I just went to my clinic, but we did mostly phone consults, only bring patients in if you have to. That was when the whole seeing patients out in the car park business started, where you have to go out and see them in their car. But it really wasn't too bad. And honestly, I have not seen one patient who had COVID. It's been super low key here. I feel incredibly lucky. And I do feel kind of guilty because we still have family back in the States and I have colleagues in the States, and they talk about, we're still wearing masks everywhere and it's scary and we can't do this and can't do that. And it's just kind of business as usual here.
Yeah, of course. Bless you.
Yeah.
I love talking to especially American PAs that have been working a little while, because really there aren't that many PAs in the UK that have more than 5 and certainly 10 years experience is really unusual. When I talk to the PAs that have been in America and have worked for a few years already, it's great to hear how you just have this amazing sort of portfolio. It's such a nice part of the profession. It
really is. I think that's one of the big perks for sure. And that's what I always mention when people ask me, should I be a PA or should I be a doctor? I always say, well, on a day-to-day basis, you do basically the same thing, with some exceptions, of course. But the plus side for PAs is when you get sick of doing family practice for a while, you just go do a specialty or you go do something else. And the freedom's really great.
And go to different countries as you're proving.
Right.
So what was that process like coming from the States over to New Zealand?
When I did it, it was amazingly easy. It's much harder now, of course, because immigration has kind of put the brakes on everything. But when I came over, it was surprisingly easy because one of the upsides of not being regulated is that like there's no paperwork to fill out. I don't have to go through the government to get, agreement. I don't have a New Zealand license to practice. Everything's just based on my United States certification, so my NCCPA certification. The way PAs are working over here is we have an agreement with the Ministry of Health and Workforce New Zealand. They will let us practice unregulated as long as we meet certain criteria. One is that we have to have graduated from an accredited university. We have to have a national certification. And so in the United States, it's the NCCPA. Canada has that as well. Does UK have that yet?
We're not certified yet. Once the GMC takes on that regulatory body for us, I think that will then lead on to standards in education. So hopefully in the near future.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have to have at least 3 years experience in whatever we're going to practice in. And generally, they will only let us practice in general practice, urgent care, or emergency department. We're not really allowed to practice in the specialties at this point.
Okay, sure. Are they areas of particular need in the workforce?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So rural, of course, as is always the case. And I just recently found out, I didn't even realize that immigration, whenever you're applying for a visa to come work, you actually get more points if you go somewhere outside of Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. You get fewer points if you're going to work there, if your job is there.
So they try and put you into these areas that really need workforce boosting.
So because of those requirements, especially the national certification, we're kind of limited on who we can take from overseas. So generally only United States PAs and Canadian PAs kind of fit all of those criteria. I totally understand because we've had several UK PAs who are like, we'd love to come over and work and they have amazing experience. And we're like, well, as soon as that certification comes through, that'll be so great.
I suspect that might change in the near future.
Absolutely. And once we get regulation, it'll be up to the medical council to decide what they want PAs to have and do and whatever. And once we get regulated, we also have plans to start a PA school in New Zealand, like a PA program. On our Facebook page, we'll get comments sometimes about, oh, is this just a holiday place for US PAs to go and hang out for a couple of years? And no, not at all. We don't want it to be that way. We understand why sometimes it feels that way to other PAs from other countries. But we want this to be something that is homegrown. We want Kiwis who live here to go to PA school and then go back to their communities and work there.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant. Yeah. So it then becomes sustainable and a career that people can choose to go into in New Zealand.
Right.
What sort of numbers we're talking about in New Zealand? How many PAs you have working out there?
Yeah. It's pretty easy to count because we've got 11.
Okay.
We're just so excited we're in double digits, honestly. Because it was like 5 forever and 7. And then over the last 2 years, we've kind of just exploded to 11.
Oh, wow. Okay. I have a few friends that are medical and other medical careers now working in New Zealand. And I was just asking them in conversation, so do they have PAs in New Zealand? Have you ever worked with one? None of them had heard of PAs yet. So right. I understand why now if there are already 11 of you out there.
We're as rare as the little brown kiwi, actually. We're excited.
Are you all in a centre together or are you spread out across the islands?
No, we're spread out. We don't have any in the South Island at this time. We're all in the North Island, but from top to bottom of the North Island.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I assume the medicine is the same from the States to New Zealand. I mean, people have the same problems and diseases. What was the system around it? What were the differences you noticed from the American system to the New Zealand way of doing things?
So it was a huge learning curve to figure out how to work in a public healthcare system versus the private system in the US. Whereas I had been used to working very autonomously and I could say, yes, you need a CAT scan. I know that's what you need and I just order it. Whereas here I have to get permission from someone or I have to try to talk a specialist into saying, yeah, you need a CAT scan or whatever. And I was surprised. So my first year was in Kaitaia, which is very rural, mostly Maori, which was incredibly interesting. I think our clinic had 60+% of our patient population was Maori, and we were very rural, and so we didn't have all of the same. We didn't have the same access to everything that I've noticed we have down here in South Auckland, of course. But working around the Maori population too, so there's all these cultural things I had to learn about that I didn't know, but then there also, I was just shocked at some of the things that Maori tend to have, like rheumatic fever. Any kid who comes in with any sore throat absolutely has to be tested for strep because there is a huge incidence of rheumatic fever still.
Wow.
And gout is huge. Like you'll have 19-year-olds who come in with gout. I'm like, why? You're not, what's going on? But it's a huge issue over here.
Is it fair to say that there's a little bit of inequality between some of the populations that are native to New Zealand and their access to healthcare?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a huge inequality. So their health literacy is really, I was surprised how different it was. So that part of it where the health literacy part was really challenging. And I know there's such a family-based culture. One patient in particular that I like to tell people about was a gentleman. He was about 40, and it takes a while for us to warm up to each other. And, I'm trying to really get to know him. And in the end, it turns out he's the sweetest, kindest person I'd ever met. And when he found out I was leaving that clinic to go somewhere else, he actually said, well, can I say a prayer with you? And he said a whole Maori prayer for me, that maybe that his God would protect me when I went to my new place. And he was just so kind.
Oh,
so kind.
That's lovely. Do people in general, other clinicians and your patients, have a problem being seen by a PA? Is there any confusion or hesitance?
There is confusion sometimes, but really no hesitance. People have been incredibly open and welcoming, but I can still see you and prescribe medicines, and not technically in New Zealand yet. I still have to prescribe everything under my supervising doctor, but.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about prescribing rights, how that works. Because obviously in the States, you would have been a prescriber, I assume, with a license, and you may have lost that, I guess, coming unregulated to New Zealand.
Right. And technically, there's nothing I can order under my own name in New Zealand. So it's very much like being a student again on rotations. I can do a full workup. I can get a diagnosis. I can say this is what I think we need. But then any order for imaging or labs, and definitely prescriptions, have to go under my supervising physician's name. And so we have to work very closely together. ACC is another thing. Do you guys have that in the UK? Like the accident coverage kind of thing?
Like kind of an indemnity malpractice kind of thing? Or?
No, more like if a patient has an accidental injury. So here they call it ACC. But if a patient is involved in an accident, then all of their treatment is covered. Like they don't have to pay for anything. So when they come in and they say, I fell and hurt my leg, then we put that under ACC.
No, we wouldn't need that in the UK because the entire system is free at point of use.
Nice.
So
okay.
yeah, that always surprises the American PAs that I speak to, the way the system works.
Yeah.
We don't do any coding, we don't do any billing, there's nothing like that at all. And what's the response been like from your clinical colleagues? Are they seeing the benefits of PAs? Are they converted?
Yes. Everyone who's worked with PAs has been incredibly positive about it.
I think that's how it happens, isn't it? It's certainly the experience I've had here in the UK.
Absolutely. And we've found that within the Ministry of Health as well, and Workforce New Zealand. We have a couple of champions, I think, who have noticed that or forward thinking, have realized that we've got to do something, obviously. And this is a great way to do it.
And what's the lifestyle like in New Zealand? I did a podcast episode with a couple of lovely PAs from the States just to find out a little bit more about the differences between the UK and the US. And one of the big differences was sort of salary and lifestyle and those kind of things. How does it compare to what you're experiencing in New Zealand? So
I think the lifestyle is wonderful. Whenever you Google New Zealand, what it's like to live in it, they talk about how work-life balance is a big thing. And that is actually very true. So when I started at this current clinic, the doctors said, now you can work 5 days if you want, but we recommend you only work 4. We don't think anybody should work more than 4 days a week. And they believe it. When the clinic's done, you go home and that's it. You don't take your stuff home and you don't work weekends, and family is very important. So that's very nice. It's very nice that everybody's pretty chill about that. Lifestyle is wonderful. Of course, New Zealand's beautiful. Everywhere you go, it's beautiful. I was surprised at how much it looked like Seattle. I thought Seattle was beautiful, where everything's green year round and it's just kind of a perfect temperature. And that's exactly what New Zealand is too. So that part's nice. It's amazing. We can drive 30 minutes either way, and we can be on a beach, or we can be in the mountains, or we can be at a waterfall somewhere hiking, tramping through the forest. It's really, really beautiful. The cost of living is an issue. I don't know if that's because it's an island, and so we have to bring everything in and everything's more expensive. It's definitely, rent is atrocious. Trying to rent anything anywhere near Auckland, it's incredibly expensive. The pay cut was pretty significant as well, because, but of course you also have to compare New Zealand dollars to US dollars. And so that kind of makes a difference as well. But PAs in New Zealand now, if you're working full time, so 40 hours a week, you will generally make anywhere between 90 and 100,000 New Zealand dollars, which is not terrible. It's certainly, you can live on that.
So in the UK, if you work full time, you are on £40,000. Something like that.
Really?
Yeah, but that's quite comfortable. Yeah. You can live comfortably on that in the UK.
Yeah, it really just depends, doesn't it? It kind of depends on cost of living and everything else.
Yeah, I think sometimes if there's an American PA considering coming over to work in the UK, they see that figure and they think, I can't live on that compared to I may have been on 3 times that in the States. But yeah, it's just the difference is the cost of living and the price of everything around you, isn't it? It's all relative. Right.
So true. So true. Some good advice I got before I came over was make sure all of your debts are paid off. Do not have any U.S. debt that you need to pay with New Zealand money, because that's going to be a real problem.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. It is really interesting. It's kind of unusual too, because every country is doing it a little bit differently. And so PAs are educated a little bit differently in different places. The concept's the same, but
Shelly, there may be people listening to this podcast at the moment, perhaps in the States, Canada, other countries, and are thinking, working in New Zealand sounds great. Is there somewhere that they can come to for advice and find out a bit more about PAs in New Zealand?
Absolutely. So we have a website, nzpasociety.org.nz. But we also have a Facebook page. So it's just NZPA Society. And we get a lot of comments and people who reach out to us through that.
Fantastic.
Oh, and exciting news. So for the visa process, we're only taking critical work visas right now due to COVID and everything. And you had to be on the list. And of course, we were unregulated, so we haven't been on the list. We've just kind of been screeching through somehow. But as of last week, a physician associate is technically in writing on the list of critical workers. And so now we can hopefully get through our visas a little bit quicker.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I do wonder if one of the consequences of the pandemic, a lot of people might start to think about their lifestyles, think about where they want to work, and perhaps it will prompt a change for them. And I do wonder whether that might be different countries and different ways of working for some people.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. I think it's going to change a lot of things for sure.
You might be up to 20 soon.
I know, right?
Shelly, thank you so much for giving up the time to talk to me. I will leave links to the Facebook page and the things that you mentioned in the show notes of this episode. So for anyone listening, they'll be able to find them in the show notes there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Oh, thank you for having us. It was nice to meet you.
Pleasure. And thanks to you for listening as well. I hope you found that really interesting to find out more about PAs and where they're working across the world. And if you'd like to get in touch with the Physician Associate Podcast, we're on social media at PA Podcast UK across Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for the next episode.
Thanks for listening. Physician Associate Podcast.